So, Michael, first of all, thank you for welcoming us here in Kykotsmovi
Hmm.
in northeast Arizona, in your beautiful place on the Hopi Reservation. Um, could you please introduce yourself and telling us maybe a little bit about your background as a 250th generation Hopi dry farming? Um,
Okay. Yeah, my name is Michael Kotutwa Johnson. Kotutwa is my middle name, a Hopi name, and that means burning embers, those coals that are burning at the bottom of the fire. But I'm an assistant professor, extension specialist at the University of Arizona for the School of Natural Resources and the Environment. And so we're talking from, like you said, the northern part of Arizona up on the little Colorado Plateau, an elevation of around 45 to 5,500 feet. Primary desert shrubs, grasses. We only get about 6 to 10 inches of annual rainfall a year. And so we've been out in this area for well over 3,000 years. And so I like to call myself a 250th generation farmer because our corn goes back that many generations. And
mm.
so it really means a lot to us. And I can talk more about that as I go.
Okay, thank you. And to begin with, could you describe the Hopi dry farming techniques?
Yeah, well, Hopi dryland farming, there's people that have like 30 inches or more, but we only have 6 to 10 inches of annual rainfall a year. And so our way of doing things is a lot different than what they call conventional agriculture or Western introduced agriculture. Because in Western agriculture, you'll have, when you're raising things like corn, you'll have 14-inch rows. Out here, we have 6-foot rows. And we don't put just one kernel per hole, we put 10 or 12 kernels per hole, and that's to optimize the available soil moisture. That's why the
Mm,
spacing's so big, and so it comes up in a clump. Everything we do out here is planted in clusters. And so because we have no irrigation system, we use no pesticides, no herbicides, but the nutrient density of what those crops produce is really amazing. It's 10 times higher than the standard corn that you would buy in the supermarket.
mm,
And so that's because it's rain fed. It brings in new soils every year off of these monsoon rains that come in end of July and August. And so it's just a unique system for an area that's adapted to fit our environment, and our environment is not manipulated to fit the crops. And so
mm,
it's a combination of this holistic approach to land management as far as agriculture is concerned.
mhm. And how does this method naturally reduce the use of water and fertilizers and pesticides, as you said
Because,
that?
like I said, every time we get a monsoon rain, I plant near
Mm,
what they call on alluvial floodplain. So new soils go into my field every single year. So I don't have to
mm,
do that. My planting depth, you have to have moisture to generate seeds. So my planting depth is anywhere from 1 foot to a foot and a half deep because that's where the moisture is when it comes to corn. The beans and the squash and the melons, which we also raise, is planted at a much shallower depth. But
mm,
that's how you're able to do that. That's how you're able to survive because everything depends upon moisture. Our biggest factor out here is how much winter moisture or snowfall we have per year. If we get
mm,
over 6 inches, then we're going to have a pretty good crop. And so that's how those crops survive. And you have to also understand that these crops have been raised in this specific location for 3,000 years. So it's
mm.
basically place-based agriculture. So after a while, plants like humans adapt to the area they live in and thrive in. And so that's how you're able to produce crops up here in
Mm.
this very semi-arid region.
So the Hopi dry farming was elaborated specifically here locally
Hmm.
in Arizona, and it's a state really known for its harsh, hot weather, very
Hmm.
dry, and it's one of the over a millennium of practicing Hopi dry farming. So, how might these methods be usefully globally in the face of climate change? Like how?
Well, I think the spacing might have something to do with it. The clustering might be okay. There's people in Africa that do cluster. There's people
Mm,
down in South America that do cluster. But the crops are adapted to this specific area. So globally, I really wouldn't I don't think it would be too much I think it'd be too much of a challenge to transport crops here over there and use those same methods. But what can be transferred is the value system that we have in place that
mm,
supports our crop production. I think not enough people talk about the value system, because this agricultural system is integrated into our cultural system and spiritual system, and that's what makes it so resilient.
Mhm.
In fact, throughout the globe, where you have high rates of crop biodiversity, you also have high rates of language biodiversity. And what
Mm.
does that mean? That means that all those plants and all those things that are grown basically have a name, and they're looked at. The relationship's different.
Mm.
So those values can be transferred. But as far as the physicalness of the crop and using the same technique somewhere else, it may work, it may not. And so it just depends.
Okay. And the Hopi cultivate different types of corn, right?
Yeah.
Could you tell us a bit about the different origins of the corn that you plant and how they connect to the Hopi cosmology?
Yeah, well, we have about 17 different varieties of corn. Each one of those varieties are used for different things. Like our white corn variety can be used to make prayer meal, that we use in our ceremonies. It's also used in a lot of our traditional dishes. We make about 42 different types of dishes that you can eat, or meals that you can eat out of corn, and that's quite a bit. And so, the connection is, for example, each one of those colors, we have 6 in Hopi. We have northeast, northwest, southeast, southwest, and up and below. And each one of those directions corresponds to a corn color that we have. So it's all integrated into that. And corn, in fact, is like our mother. We looked at it as our mother. A perfect ear of white corn that's filled all the way to the top is used for things like baby naming ceremonies. And when a baby's only 2 weeks old and she or she's raised to the sun, they're put a small little piece of Hopi sweet corn pudding in their mouth to tie them to the land. So
Mm.
that's how deep it is with us in our agricultural system. And that kind of goes back to what I was just talking about, the importance of having that discipline and that integration of this agricultural system into our society, which makes things very, very sustainable.
Mm. As what you just mentioned was also mentioned in the article or the essay of People of the Corn that you sent us, written by Dennis Wall and Virgin
Messiah's fault.
Massive. Yeah.
Hmm.
The corn is portrayed both as sustenance and spirit
Hmm.
because it's a gift of life from Masa.
Hmm.
And so, who is Masa?
Well,
And how has that shaped your understanding of corn farming?
Well, from what I was told by my grandfather, Masao was a person who was the guardian of this earth when we came up from the world below, and so he gave us, when we got up here, he gave us a planting stick, he gave us seed and water. But the most important thing that he told us, from what I was told, was that we have to have faith in everything we do if we want to survive in this harsh desert environment. And so that still holds true today. If you look around here, and I'm sure you'll have photographs, it doesn't look like things like corn, which requires all that moisture to grow, actually can grow in an area like this. This year we have a drought, but that's okay because we're used to having these type of things. We don't always raise a crop every year. And I think one of the most important things is not only a physical thing, a spiritual thing, but it's also a mental thing too. For
Mm.
example, when I was building the house that's behind me, a gentleman came up and he told me to put seeds in my plaster and put it on the wall as I plaster it. And I thought he was crazy, but he told me, though, he said, I told you to do that because when we went through these long periods of drought like we're having, we always wanted to remember we had food in the house. See,
Mm.
so it's a psychological thing. So it's all integrated into our system, and it's
Mhm.
very, very precious.
Mhm. So you think that the seeds of the corn are basically sacred like children.
Yes, they are.
And how does this spiritual respect influence the deliberate rejection of pesticides, uh, or rather biocides?
Well,
Maybe
for
we
one
could
thing,
say.
we've never had those in this area, so those are very foreign to us, and we're not out to make money.
Mm.
Our crops are very, especially for subsistence. The only reason people use pesticides and herbicides is because they want to grow a lot and they want to make it as efficient as possible. But the negative side of the effect is all the negative consequences to our physical health, because we know things like glyphosate cause cancer. There's
Mm.
other herbicides and pesticides out there that I know cause a lot of our problems. But we're refusing to really look at that because we're still wrapped up in a market system that thrives off of
Mm.
quantity and efficiency, and quality doesn't have no place in that. And so out here, it's about quality. It's not about quantity and efficiency. It's about
Mm.
quality. And that's how come we don't do that.
Mm. And you emphasize important values, as you spoke before about faith and also humility and patience and hard work, and the connection to the earth. So, over time, is there a price to be paid for this? And also, is it sustainable in this postmodern world? Is it?
Well, I don't know if there's a price to be paid for this. I think the only price to be paid for this are healthy bodies, healthy people. I mean, here in America, we have reservations here where Indians live on that have about an 80% diabetic rate. In fact, just recently, I was talking to a pediatrician. He was saying that he's diagnosing 4-year-old American Indian children with type 2 diabetes now. And so the price to be paid is the opposite of what the price to be paid I think that you're talking about. But will it work in this modern world? I don't know, because a lot of my work is focused on what I call the revitalization of the American Indian food system. And that's to try to get good quality food back into the schools, given to a people who were in America before everybody else. And so it's just giving back in a way that I think we need to give back, and that's giving back to the community.
So the high rate of diabetes, if I can ask, is related to
It's related to the food. It's related to the processed food. I almost can guarantee that, because we've been taking away when a lot of these reservations got moved away or had their agricultural system taken away. They eat these new foods that were being made, and their bodies have not adapted to that yet. Maybe someday they will, but they just can't handle it. So they get all these things like with the sugars and the white flours and the starch. It just gets people sick. And so you wind up, the life expectancy of an American Indian in America is about 53 years old. And so that's not much in a great nation like ours we call the United States.
In 2025.
Yeah, in 2025.
And would corn farming, rituals, ceremonies are all inseparable?
Yep, they're all tied together. Yep.
Are they still today practiced?
Yes, they
in
are.
general? Yeah.
100%. I think Hopi is one of the very few places in the other Pueblo tribes which still has a lot of their ceremonies going on. And I think that's important. Every time in the summertime at Hopi, the ceremonies go on year round. In the summertime is when people come up to watch them. And in the wintertime, they go back into our what they call the kivas, which is like a church, an underground church, and they're practiced in there. And so that's been going on for a long, long time.
Underground, do you mean that the kiva is the round structures as you have in your house?
Yes, it's either that or nowadays they're rectangular, but that's like our place of emergence. It represents the emergence into this world, which is we believe the fourth world. There's another world coming, believe it or not, that they tell me, but we haven't quite got there yet. But it'll happen, because as a population, this may sound kind of far-fetched, but we seem to get to a certain plateau and then we wind up destroying ourselves only because of our immorality and our greed and things like that always seem to take over at the end. It's happened every time. And so, you just kind of hold on and see what happens.
So that means there would be a fifth world.
Yes, there would be. Okay. It's the start over point again. Start over the ceremonies, start over talking with each other, start over everything.
There's so in the essay People of the Corn, there's a what I'd say a really beautiful passage that I'd like to read and quote related to talking and singing to the seeds and the ears of the corn. So it says, the connection between the people and the corn is pervasive and deeply sacred. And that's how you take care of the plants. You sing to them because they're just like humans. They have their own lives and they like to hear you singing to them. So it's as if the sound of the voice energizes or gives vitality to the corn, which in return will grow and feed the people. So could you say something about this very beautiful practice of the acoustic, or the belief that the voice carries something very caring as well?
We have a saying up here at Hopi says that we are like corn. And so that is our relative. And so when you talk to it, it's like me and you talk. It's like me and you talking here face to face. You're encouraging that. It's the love and the nurturing that make that corn grow. Sometimes when I was a young man, my grandfather used to, after we finished planting, we'd have a foot race across the field. And he said when we do that, it makes the corn grow faster because you can
Mm.
feel the energy. You can feel the energy of the young people running across the field.
Mm.
And so when you're out there singing, I'm sure they feel that same type of energy too. Now, has there been studies to look at that? I think maybe there's one or two if I remember, but it's really remarkable what you can do and how your body relates to that. Because corn in Hopi, from what I understood and what I was told, it has the same body parts as a human. And so you have the spine and the tassel and the arms. They're all give Hopi names, are the same names for your body parts in Hopi.
Mm.
And so it's very integrated like that, you know. And so it's but it's just that whole spiritual connection and that whole nurturing, looking at that corn cob with 1,000 something generations on that one corn cob. But it's just trying to have people understand that this is not just a commodity, but it's a way of life.
Mm.
You know, it's the Hopi way, and so it's important.
And you say that the corn have ears.
Hmm.
Is it the so it's not the same? Is it the practice of singing also related to squash, or is it particularly for corn?
This particularly the corn, but anytime you're out there talking to your plants, you talk to all your plants. You know,
Mm.
corn is just something that was highlighted in that article because Virgil, he was a really good corn farmer too, but he grew all other crops too. But
Mm.
that was what they called the people of the corn, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what it was focused on. But we talk to everything out here. You know, there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's a good way. It's really transcends you into a different world, so to speak.
Mm. Would you say that planting corn is a form of dialogue with the world below, as below the roots as for the plant itself and the ancestors and the underworld, and also the world above? That so, for example, here we can see the clouds and the sun and the prayers, hoping for also, I can imagine, rain
Hmm.
to come.
I think it would be. I didn't really haven't thought about that much, but in a way, when you're planting, you plant so deeply when it comes to things like corn that you're really connecting like that, and that corn is being like it's going back into his mother, and then she's nurturing that being until that comes up from deep depths. You know, it's over 2 weeks. You're just waiting, hoping it's going to come, and boom, here it comes. You know, Misa's son. So there's definitely that connection. It's kind of how we would, from what I was told, how we emerged from below, you know, to come up into this world, to have a new beginning. So it's just like those seeds when they come up and those little, those little parts of the plant come up through the soil, they're into a new world too, you know, but they're also very secure because
Mm.
they're tied into the ground too. They've got strong footing like we should have, you know, and so it's kind of a very beautiful thing to think about when you really want to think about it.
Mm. And would you say that the Hopi cosmology continue to influence the way Hopi are farming today?
Yeah, I would. I think because, you know, I mean, it's just like that's all we know. I mean, we don't I mean, there's very few new things that we try. There's maybe new crops that we have tried, but the planting methods have basically stayed the same. But it's also not so much the planting methods that's important, but it's the why you're planting. I
Mm.
think that's what people miss. It's so when I have kids out here, or youth out here, I try to explain to them why we need to plant because over time when you make adjustments, whether the spacing between the rows gets smaller or larger, that can change because that goes with the environment and what you see coming. So
Mm.
but the why never changes. You got to plant. It's the thing that you're supposed to do, and you don't even have a question about it. You just go out and do it because that's what you do. Simple as that, but it's hard for people to understand that.
Mm. Is it encouraged a lot at
Oh
this
yes, it's very
in the?
encouraged.
Mm-mm.
You're supposed to do that as a young person. You know, remember I said that you put a small little piece of sweet corn pudding in a baby's mouth to tie them to the land. That's beautiful.
Mm.
You know, and so when they're little, they go out there, even though they can't work hard. They have a little hole, go out there with the walking down behind their uncle or their grandfather and plant. You know, and hold the weeds. And they might not last long, but they're out there. You know,
Mm.
and just falling asleep under the corn bushel, and it's just cool to see.
Mm. Did you experience it yourself
Oh yeah, I
when you
did.
were a
You know,
child?
yes, I
Mm-mm.
did. I did. My grandfather would take me out to my fields out here, and we'd hoe in the morning, get up early, and then we go have breakfast, come back for another hour. Then we were done for the day, and then come back after
Mm.
supper in the evening, and maybe hoe a little bit more, and that was it. That was my day as a kid. You know, got running around and having fun. So.
Mm. We asked you what could we lose by not using pesticides, and you said, "What about what would we gain by not using pesticides? So the question is, what do we gain? And is there a question of harmony, uh, spiritual grounding, resilience, health, all of it? Like, is it
I think it's
something
all of those.
universal?
I think it's all those. I think pesticides are only needed because the fields are too big. You
Mm,
can't go out there and manage bugs. I care, like if I have a bean field or even a squash field, I go out there by hand and kill those bugs myself with my fingers.
mm,
And so by going out there all the time, you establish this relationship, the importance, the values that I'm talking about. You're not
mm,
depending upon just spraying something on there and walking away and letting it be okay. What kind of relationship is that? That's like
mm,
putting your kid in front of the television set, turning it on, and then walking away from him. Same
mm,
thing with plants. So we have a lot to gain, not only in terms of values, but also in terms of discipline
mm,
and also in terms of resiliency by doing the same thing over and over again. That's what makes it sustainable. It's that relationship. It's
mm,
more so that than anything else. So why use another substitute? Why? It's like our cell phones. We have cell phones. We turn those on, and that's our pesticide. We forget about everything else because it's too
mhm,
easy, right? Why do we always
mm,
have to do
mhm,
things that are easy? When I was a young man, my grandpa would take me out here and we'd do hard things. Hoe weeds, fix fences.
mm,
We've lost a lot of that in our culture around the globe. It's too
mm,
easy, too convenient. We're a society of convenience. We're not a society of sustainability. So we have to
mm,
think about those things. So we can
mm,
gain a heck of a lot by not using pesticides.
mhm. And what kind of you mentioned the bugs. Are these bugs, for example, useful for other things, or do they have to be
No, you can
killed
use
in a
them
way?
to feed your chickens if you have chickens. There's
Mm,
cutworms that are under the ground that the chickens love, and the lizards, or you can lay them out and the other animals come pick them up. You gotta give them a free meal.
mhm,
But yeah, so they're useful in their own ways, and but those kind of predators like cutworms and even cornworms and these little beetles that go out on your squash plants, you take care of them when they're young and they don't bother you after a while.
mhm,
Everything comes in stages out here. That's why you got to be out here all the time
mm,
because certain things happen to plants at different stages. So you got to be out here to watch them, right? It's like
mhm,
watching your children. If you don't watch your children, they're going to run away.
mhm. And what other animals are there out here that can be quite threatening to the corn
There,
plants?
well, not only the corn plants, but there's crows, or
Mm,
ravens they call them sometimes. There's also coyotes, like they go into your melon patch and take your melons and carry them off. Badgers, things like that. But that's about it. There's the other things. Crows is the main problem. What to do
mhm,
with crows, and the best thing to be out there and watch your field. And I'm not a person that believes in poisoning everything. You
mm,
also have some gophers problems that can
mm,
dig up your plants after a while. But if you catch them early, then they're not a problem anymore.
mm.
But you gotta watch it. You really gotta watch your plants.
So it's basically being present,
Being present.
looking after and caring
That's
for
right. Just like a parent
that
would.
reduces
It
the
reduces
threat.
the
Mm, mm,
problems.
mm. And finally, as someone deeply rooted in the Hopi tradition or culture, how um, would you have any messages? What message would you put out or offer to other communities around the world? Uh,
I think just remembering your values, remembering who you are as a person, your identity. I think, and always put your community first, because by doing that, you rely less upon yourselves. It's very important to care about yourself and love yourself, but you also to think about it's the health of your community that's important too,
mhm,
because that's the beauty of it. It's out here. It's really about the health of our community more than anything else. And that's so important to me. So my message would be, love yourself, but also try to take care of your community as best you can.
Are there any other points or messages that you'd like to share?
No,
Or
I
about
mean,
the singing, for example, the voice?
well,
Do you?
I think, I mean, like I said, singing has been a part of my
Mhm,
daily stuff, not daily, but stuff that I like to do, and that's just natural for me. But I really, as far as talking to the European crowd and things like that over there, there's just different ways of doing things, right? I mean, it's not all conventional agriculture. I've seen pictures like in France and in Italy where people are proud of their food systems. You know, they can say,
Mhm.
well, this tomato's from this region or this wine's from this region.
Mhm.
In America, we don't have that luxury. You know, we can't say
Mm.
that because we don't take care of things like they would in Europe. So I give them credits on that. For example, when you look at the stuff that's available, like here we have 1,000 more additives than what they do in Europe. You know,
Mm.
and that's why we have these ultra processed foods and people get sick. So one of the things I would like to talk about Europe is to keep practicing your system. Be proud of your food like you are yourselves, and it's gonna be okay.
Mm. Mhm.
So that's I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you so much.